A Life of Unending Suffering by Jessica Maselli. Slavery is a major part in American history and will always be. It divided the country and dehumanized the African American people. Being a slave meant living a life of unending work and harsh punishment. Today, African Americans are still impacted from slavery and continue to fight for an end to discrimination and a push towards equality. Slaves worked continuously throughout the day until night, sometimes not even having a break to sit down and eat. Harry McMillan was a slave who worked on a plantation when he was a young boy. He worked from morning until evening, starting at daylight, continuing until late in the evening. He had to complete 2 to 3 hoeing tasks a day in the fields. He did not always have time to sit and enjoy a meal. Slaveholders treated slaves very poorly. They would whip and beat their slaves as a form of punishment. Beating of slaves was also a way to portray their dominance, as they are the ones who were in control, not the slaves. Uncle Ben, who was enslaved in Alabama, Texas, and North Carolina, states how slaveholders would whip their slaves if they did not finish a task. If the slaves could not handle the task, sometimes they would go into the woods to try and escape, but only to be chased back by dogs. The slaveholders would also chain them so they could not run away. Slaves lived in constant fear that their families may be separated due to the selling of slaves. They could either be sold in a group or individually and not be placed with their family. It did not matter if a slave was part of a family. Families were separated and some mothers never saw their children again. Charity Bowery, an African American woman, was enslaved in North Carolina. She states how the mistress would not let her children be with her. They were sold one after the other. She tried to raise money on the side of the road while she was washing items so she could try and buy back her children. The mistress still refused because she thought she could find a better market. Slavery is still impacting society today. For African Americans, the Black church is the only institution that has not changed to the views that some whites convey. Religion has played a vital role in helping African Americans overcome oppression endured during slavery and with white supremacy in society today. Racism can take a toll on the mental health of African Americans. According to Avin Poussant, a Harvard psychiatrist, suicide rates from 1980 to 1995 doubled among blacks due to the emotional effects of racism. According to a Portland State University researcher, Joy DeGroy, she developed a theory explaining the unresolved trauma on the behaviors of blacks. Her theory is post-traumatic slave syndrome. This trauma is passed down from generation to generation among African Americans. Black Lives Matter is a movement striving for liberation of all Black lives. Black Lives Matter was created in 2012 after a few instances involving a Black person being shot and killed by a white person. This movement brings up important issues regarding the Black lives in society today. One main focus is how African Americans' lives are deprived of their basic human rights. The November 4th presidential election of President Barack Obama marks the highest electoral point since the Civil Rights Revolution. For many African Americans, Obama's presidency was a huge victory and a mark against hundreds of years of black slavery, racism, and segregation. Obama's victory is very symbolic and which all African Americans understand. Living a life of slavery meant having constant fear in each day, suffering from cruel and harsh treatments, and working continuously from dawn until dusk. Both men and women worked long and strenuous days. Families were separated and displaced, not knowing if they would ever see each other again. African Americans continue the push for liberation and an end to racism. Slavery will always be a major part of American history that will impact society forever.